Today's class, as you can see, is list to sell. As I mentioned, this is the fourth class out of a 10-week or 10 class series over the course of the next 5 weeks. And really what I want to share with you today is just as we just previously talked about, is anybody that's truly a selling agent should treat a listing as an investment. When you shift your mindset and understand that every single property that you put in the MLS, every single property that you put your sign in the front yard, that's number one, an investment, a financial investment, a time investment, and your name is attached to that sign. So it's your signature. I think a lot of times in our industry, we list houses just to list, but we're not listing things that we know that are actually going to sell off the market. Maybe they're overpriced. Maybe we have a difficult seller. And a lot of times it's all in how we've prepped it before we've ever listed it, and also kind of the confidence that we have. As mentioned, I work with a lot of real estate agents, and there's a lot of agents that work primarily with buyers because they're intimidated to work with sellers. And I'm here to tell you, when I got licensed 14 years ago, I started working with sellers right out the bat. So I was never intimidated to work with a seller. So I think, if I can do it, anybody can do it. But then also, as you guys can see in my bio, I'm a second generation real estate investor. So I'm often the seller myself. And over the course of my career and flipping hundreds of houses, I've often been the seller. So I often think like a seller. And sometimes I'm not saying that you have to go turn around and sell your house, but we have to put ourselves in a seller's shoes, because it is a very emotional time. It is a very hectic time, especially if they're occupying the house, getting it ready for showings and moving and going through stuff, especially if they've been there for a long time. There's a lot of emotional attachment. So our job as the real estate professional is to walk them through that with ease. And a lot of times as an agent, we take the emotion out of it because it's numbers for us, but we have to really think and operate as the seller does. So just kind of food for thought. I'm a broker associate. As I mentioned, I've been licensed for 14 years. I've been with EXP for 8.5 years. As back when we were only 300 agents, now we're almost 90,000 agents. Also co-own OKC Home Investments with my husband, where we have flipped hundreds of houses, own commercial. We've done apartments, commercial strip centers. Now we do some restaurants. So done a little bit of everything. And if you're interested in hear how we turned our initial $25,000 investment into a multi-million-dollar portfolio, one of the next classes that we're going to do in the coming weeks is Real Estate Investing 101. Master lead generator. I was actually looking at my team yesterday. We've lead generated over 150 warm leads in the last 30 days. So definitely like to practice what I preach. And just like you, I'm juggling my personal and my professional life, married and have 2 wonderful boys. Quick disclaimer, as I've already mentioned, check your local guidelines and with your managing broker. So a lot of this is meant to be generic, but every brokerage, every company, every market, every managing broker does things a little bit differently. So first off, we want to start with defining your goals. Define your big why that drives you every single day. Now, I know that some of this sounds a little bit cliche, and I think I recognize everybody on today's call. You've taken my other classes, and as I mentioned, they're supposed to build on one another. But the reason why it's important to know your why and have emotion attached to your why is that's what's going to motivate you to get out of bed or do the hard things that you don't want to do, right? So if you're intimidated to go meet with a seller and they're ready to go, when your why is big enough, the how becomes a lot easier. Now you have to attach some emotion to your why. It can't just be like, I want to make $200,000 a year, right? That's not motivation enough for a lot of us to get out of bed. Now, if you say, I want to make $200,000 a year because I need to send my kids to college, or I want to give to this charitable event, or I want to build a new house, then you're attaching something meaningful to that. How many transactions do you want or need per year? We definitely want to be realistic in this number. When I talk to newer agents, they're like, I want to sell 100 homes in my first year. Although it can be done, I'm not here to tell anybody that you can't do something, but you want to definitely be realistic. And then why is that transaction count so important to you? If you've been in the industry a little while, then you definitely know your hourly worth, and that's going to help you leverage and delegate other tasks. And definitely, we went through this in our business planning class. How many appointments do you want to go on? per week, per month? How many calls do you need to make every single day in order to set those appointments? How many listings can you handle personally? This one is huge, especially if you're going to become listing heavy. There's a certain threshold as far as listings to properly service your clients that you can only handle so much as one individual, that you might have to start bringing on either agents to your team, or a TC, transaction coordinator, a VA, virtual assistant, some kind of help to make sure that things don't fall through the crack. Will you leverage delegate for additional support? It goes in line with how many listings can you handle personally. I know back when I was in production, I know that once I got past 10 listings as a single agent, then that started to hit that threshold that I would need to bring on some additional support. Create a vision, a one sheet business plan, which we've gone over before. And the most important one here is get rid of your limiting beliefs. Everybody can represent sellers. Everyone can sell a house. But when you get rid of your limiting beliefs that you can't do it, or there's no, you don't know the market, you don't know how to sell a house, there's always a way. And one of the ways that we just talked about before we got started here was, a lot of times if it's out of your scope of expertise, go co-list with somebody. I mean, we're lucky that we're in a situation in the state of Oklahoma that if you're licensed, then you can, for the most part, if your broker allows it, you can sell in the entire state. So go co-list with somebody in that market. Or even if it's in your own market and you've never represented a seller, go co-list with somebody and set those proper expectations that you want to learn the process. Think of it like you're working, but you're also learning at the same time. You are paid directly proportional to the service that you give. If you want to get paid more, you will have to serve more. I think that's across the board in real estate in general. We are in the relationships business, as Grant Cardone would say. The difference between a contact and a contract is the R, which stands for relationship. So we definitely always want to be serving, provide value, come with that mindset, because if it's just about numbers, although numbers are very important in running any business, but if it's just about numbers and commissions, definitely the clients are going to sense that. So how do we get started? First off, create a personal brand that's in alignment, of course, with your brokerage. So check with your brokerage on what your branding guidelines are. And then, of course, check with your, if you're in Oklahoma, check with OREC. But create a personal brand. I think that's huge. A lot of times as real estate agents, we're always trying to brand ourselves under the brokerage. Although there are some requirements around that, I think it's also important to brand yourself, because for the most part, clients are working with the individual agent, not with the brokerage. A lot of times in the general public, they don't even know what company you're affiliated with. And so it's important to choose a brokerage that's in alignment with you and that you can create a personal brand. Maintain top of mind awareness. We talked about on Monday, if you want to own market share, you need to own mind share. So how are you going to stay top of mind? Show that you're a realtor for life. Everything you do should live, breathe real estate. Share your success stories, but don't let all of your social media posts just be that you sold this house and you sold this house, and share the journey. People don't want to just see that you closed on this house. Think about sharing your life and your journey, your personal life, your professional life. People want to follow that and really sense that authenticity. That's what's going to build rapport. That's what they're going to connect with. Share your success stories. So one of the ways you can do that is through video testimonials. Although it's great to get Google testimonials and testimonials on your website, but nothing is more powerful, especially for lead conversion, than video testimonials. So while you're sitting at the closing table, maybe you're waiting on docs from the closer, ask your clients, hey, do you mind if you shoot just a short 1-minute video and share with potential clients the experience and the service that you had? 9 times out of 10, they're going to say yes, and come unless they completely hate video. So definitely utilize that time as you're sitting there waiting for docs. Say, hey, can I pull out my phone and just shoot a quick video? Now, your website. It's not just about you, but your results. So that's what we're going to talk about a little bit later on. Sellers care about 2 things. They care about your results, and that goes in 2 different ways. How are you going to sell their house in the shortest time possible and for the most money? That's what they care about. They don't care about how great you are, how great your brokerage is, how great all these different statistics. They care about your results. Now, as I mentioned, if you're newer and you don't have those results to share yet, well, then yeah, go partner with somebody. That's what I did 14 years ago. Go partner with somebody that had the results and really feed off of their results and share their story, because now you've created a partnership. Consider yourself a real estate coach, coaching your clients through the biggest transaction of their life. That's what we're doing, guys. We're not here to make decisions for our seller. We're here to coach them through the process and be the professional. We're going to highlight this a little bit later on, but if you are going to go to your physician and you're scheduling a surgery and the physician is sitting there asking what you think instead of giving advice, don't you think you guys are probably going to get a different doctor, right? That's no different. You should go on a listing appointment with the confidence and really have it set up where you're coaching them through the entire transaction and prepare for all seasons of business. We know coming off COVID that, the last couple of years have been an all-time high. The market's been crazy. It's been very unrealistic and unsustainable, in my opinion. And now we're converting back to a normal market. So all you have to do is shift. The business is out there. I promise you guys, there's plenty of business out there. Like I said, I'm in Puerto Rico and I just lead generated 150 warm leads for my team in the last 30 days without even really turning the full faucet on, if you will. And so that means the business is out there. It's for you to go and get it. So seller interview, how do you set the proper expectations? First off, don't buy your listing. What do I mean by that? Does anybody have any ideas? What does don't buy your listing mean?
Isn't that when you tell a seller that you basically overprice it to lead them to believe that they're going to get more money bottom line if they list with you?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for that. And I say that in don't buy your listing is like we talked at the very beginning of this. If you're setting it up right, a listing is an investment, right? It's a time investment. It's a financial investment. So if you're just listing to list and you're giving them unrealistic numbers or you're letting them determine the price and you're still listing it, shame on you, right? Because you're buying it and you're really setting it up for somebody else to come in. I'll give you guys just a quick example. Like I said, I just put my house on the market in Puerto Rico, and we had about 5 different local real estate agents, because I'm not licensed in Puerto Rico, come and give us a seller evaluation. I was shocked at the differences. We had people come in and say our house was worth 2.5, which obviously I would love. But then we also had agents say that it was worth 1.5. And what I found was on my own due diligence and my own appraisal that we listed at 1.9. But do you guys see how drastic the differences were from 1.5 to 2.5? So I had a wide variety of agents, some agents coming in trying to lowball it because they know it'll sell faster but I'm not motivated to necessarily sell in a short time frame. Or I had other agents that were coming at such a high number to get me excited as a seller just to get the listing. And then what's going to happen? They're going to come in a month later and say, okay, we need to drop the price, right? You haven't had any showings. You need to drop the price. Now we'll talk about some of the ways that you can strategize and have a schedule of price drops, which is completely okay and sometimes necessary. But I always say you have to be in the ballpark, right? You have to be in the ballpark as far as numbers. So the second one here is ask good questions and take notes. So when I walk into a seller interview, and I purposely call it an interview because I am interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing me. So when they're interviewing me as a real estate professional, at the same time, I'm deciding if I want to work with them. Make sense? So I walk in, number one, with the confidence. Number two, I walk in with really the expectation that I'm going to get the listing if I want it. There's no doubt about it. And I do that by a couple different ways. Number one, I don't walk in with this generic listing presentation that, shows how great I am and how great my brokerage is and yada, yada, yada. And honestly, they don't care, right? I walk in, which I'm going to share later with you guys, with a 52-point marketing plan that's really showing them how I'm going to get their home sold in the least amount of time possible and for the most money. And then as I walk, I ask for a walkthrough. I have a notepad. I'm taking notes. I'm engaging. I'm asking questions, and I'm using that time to build rapport. So I'm showing them how I'm going to get their home sold. and also showing that I'm being attentive and I'm taking notes. So taking notes and writing it by hand is incredibly important. Ask yourself, are you listing to sell or are you setting it up for another agent? And what I mean by that is if you overprice the listing, if you accept the listing, because nobody says you have to accept the listing, even if they want to overprice it. And what's going to happen is 6 months down the line or whatever time frame you put on the contract, it expires, and then somebody else is going to come in behind you. They're going to list it. They're going to list it at probably the price that it should have been listed at to begin with, and they're going to sell it quickly, right? Has anybody ever had that happen to them? Go ahead and put in the chat, yes or no. Remember, we've got to make sure we're engaging throughout in order to get CE credit. Okay, Liz, I think you're the only one that said said yes. So I appreciate the transparency there. So I've definitely, early on in my career, I've had it happen to me too. And so that's why I say that is, make sure you're doing your due diligence up front. One of my mentors long ago really taught me something that was very important and has always stuck with me. And he said that, Micah, if you think you're never going to get paid, then you're never going to get paid. And what he meant by that is at the time I had a very, very difficult seller. And I decided to fire this client. I no longer wanted to work because I knew we were never going to get to the closing table. Now in reality, I let her go. She had inherited the property, so she was incredibly emotional about the property, rightfully so, completely understand. But she was just incredibly difficult to work with. So about 3 months go by and she contacts me again. She's like, listen, I've interviewed other agents. I don't want to work with anybody else but you. You're straight up, you're honest with me, and I'm sorry for everything that I said and I've done. And I was like, okay, the only way we're going to work together again is we're going to have to set up some proper expectations. And because she was willing to listen, we actually, the second time around, got the home sold relatively quickly, and I think for full price. So it's definitely a teamwork atmosphere, and let them know that we're all working together as a team. Consider every listing an investment. We've touched on that. Control the conversation and the outcome. This is huge. I can't tell you how many times I have shadowed agents on listing appointments. And as I mentioned in the physician example, they're asking questions without certainty. So they're asking the seller, well, what do you think it's worth? What would you like to do? And they're showing that a lack of confidence and a lack of certainty and a lack of knowledge. They're not controlling the conversation. Is the seller pricing within the ballpark? Just as my, very extreme example that I gave you about Puerto Rico. But if the house is worth 200,000 and your seller wants to list at 250, well, okay, that might be out of the ballpark, right? Now, if you're at 200,000 and maybe they want to start at 2,099. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we can start at 210, but I do want you to understand that you are above what the comps, it's not what I think the price is, the house is worth. It's not what you think the house is worth. It's what the market is showing us. So I do believe that you're about $10,000 over what the market is bearing that your home is worth. So I have no problem at starting at your price at $209,900. But here's what we're going to agree to, and we're going to put this in writing. We're going to have a schedule of price adjustments. If there's no showings, no offers in the next 2 weeks, the house is still on the market, then you automatically agree to drop the price to 200,000, right? So you're setting up that proper expectation instead of pricing it high and then coming back 2 weeks later and say, well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we don't have any showings, so we're going to have to drop the price. Nobody likes having that conversation. Have that conversation up front, right? And then schedule it out, but make sure that they're pricing within the ballpark, that they're not so high that, like I said, you're listing it to sell and not setting it up for another agent to come behind you once it expires. Are you competitive with active, pending, and sold listings? So when you pull comps, a lot of agents will tend to just pull sold comps, sold properties. So maybe they look at the last 30, 90, 180 days. What is sold? When I list something, I'm not just looking at solds, but I'm also looking at what's active and what's pending. Any guesses on why I'm doing that?
So you can tell them what's going on in the market right now in their area?
Yep, absolutely. Because it's important. Would you guys agree that it's important to know who your competition is, because I need to make sure that not only are we priced correctly, but we're now being competitive against everything else that's considered a competitor that's active in the market, right? Does that make sense? Is your selling willing to participate in a staging consult? So you don't have to do this. Nothing says that you have to do this. This was just personally a practice that I always did, is I had partnered with a stager. Now I did not, now on my personal investments and vacant homes, I did go all in and I would stage the houses with furniture. Those were my personal investments. Now, obviously that's quite the investment. So I don't always recommend that you have to, as a real estate agent, do that for your sellers. But what I would offer is a staging consult. So I would let them know that my stager is going to come in for an hour or two. They're going to try to use everything that the seller already has. They might ask them to put some things away. They might rearrange some furniture, but they're also going to have those hard conversations with them in terms of Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you need to put any, for showings, you might need to put some firearms away. You might need to put any medical devices or prescription drugs or anything like that. So my stager knew exactly what I wanted her to cover. And the reason why this is important is she was almost able to come in and play good cop, bad cop, where she was the bad guy, right? She was coming in and saying, we need to deodorize. Maybe it smells like pet over, or you have too much stuff, or you have too many professional photos, or you have too many firearms that we need to store away. And really let her come in, give them a checklist. She would literally take photos and give them a checklist of everything that they need to do in order to prepare the house for the market. So I would let them know. I mean, it's probably going to be 2 weeks before we get your house live, because number one, we're going to start with a staging consult. We're going to give you some homework, and we're going to make sure that it hits the market right. And we're going to take professional photography. Now, my stager and my photographer knew each other, and they worked together again as a team dynamic, where my stager would even know the angles that my photographer was going to take for their photos and would kind of adjust accordingly. So sometimes you can even have the stager come in as the photographer's there a second time just to kind of move things around. But again, I think it's important to have a staging consult. So going back to a financial investment, when I took on a listing, I would pay for a staging consult and I would pay for professional photography. Now, I never bound somebody by a listing agreement with me. Again, this is something that's a personal preference. I would let them out of the listing agreement if they wanted out of it, but there was a stipulation clause in there that if they wanted out of their listing agreement, they would reimburse me X amount of dollars for the staging consult and the professional photographer. So I would pay those things up front, but they would reimburse me if they wanted to exit the listing agreement. In 14 years, I never had somebody do that, right? But it did kind of open the door for that conversation and have the seller have some skin in the game. So how flexible is your seller with showings? This is incredibly important. You can have the perfect house. You can have it properly staged and properly marketed. But if your seller's not flexible, then again, are you ever going to close? Are you ever going to get paid? It might be something that you consider not listing or, frankly, just referring out. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated is your seller? And as I mentioned, interview them just as much as they are interviewing you. Walk in with confidence as if the listing was already yours. 80% of success is by psychology and energy, the vibes that you're giving off. If you're not confident, the seller's going to sense that. You have to believe that you're the best person for the job, right? That's why I always start classes with mindset, because that's honestly where success starts with. Don't ask questions in the interview to show uncertainty. We've already covered that just briefly. Come to the meeting ready with your listing agreement and marketing plan in place. Don't go to a listing appointment without a listing agreement that shows that you want to secure the listing. Show them your marketing place, how you're going to sell their house, your marketing plan rather. You can send them a generic listing presentation. They can review it before the meeting and ask you questions, but show them while you're there how you're going to get their home sold. And then if I decided I wanted the listing, I would never leave without going ahead and scheduling the staging consult and the photographer. So we sign a listing agreement. And I'd say, while I'm here, let's go ahead, because my stager's busy, my photographer's busy, let's go ahead and get them on schedule. So again, they understand that it's a team dynamic and you're pushing them forward. You're controlling the conversation. You're controlling the process. Provide a specialized marketing plan for the seller. No standard listing agreement. We talked about that. Be ready to get your sellers to commit to schedule to the stager and photographer. If you show, feel, doubt the sellers will sense it. The number one reason for failure is your own mindset. A lot of us don't like to admit it, but that is the harsh reality. So create your marketing plan. How are you going to market the property outside of the MLS? I will share with you my 52-point marketing plan. If you want a copy, go ahead and put your email in the chat, and I'm happy to share with you that with you later today. So if you want a copy of my 52-point marketing plan, go ahead and put your email in the chat. I'll give you just a minute to do so. All right. If you're going to provide a marketing plan, make sure you perform your marketing plan. Don't put a bunch of steps in there that you don't even plan on doing. Of course, don't fall victim to the market. Shift and adjust appropriately. Foresee what's going to happen in the market. Like I said, have those conversations up front. Do you need to schedule price adjustments up front? Have those conversations before the house ever hits the market. Who's going to pay for staging and photos? I talked about that I would pay for them up front, but I definitely have agents that I've worked with that would ask the seller to pay, and then they would reimburse them at closing. So again, just check with your managing broker on what your company's regulations in terms of that. I would add this provision: if the seller cancels or breaches these agreements, if the seller to reimburse the listing agent amount up to, let's say, $500 for the staging consult and photos. Fill out everything possible in the MLS. It's going to hit more searches. This is one thing that I've never understood is when I look at an MLS listing and half of it's filled out, it's like they only put in the required fields. Well, here's a reality. If you don't put every single field that you possibly can, like school district, doesn't it include a pool, what bedrooms are downstairs or upstairs, and somebody's on the buying side and they're searching for those things specifically, then your house could be the perfect listing for them, but it's not even going to be a contender because it's not showing up in the searches. So just do your due diligence and, be the professional and fill out as much information as possible. And then brokers opens extravaganza. So what I'm going to share with you today is how to separate yourself from everybody else. Now, put in the chat, how many of you have been to a broker's open, or maybe you've set one up and might have done it last minute, or they were just giving away like a $50 gift card and you had a handful of people there. Anybody experience that, or just me? Got a good mix between yeses and nos. So a lot of times agents will put together brokers open. Maybe they partner with some other agents in the same neighborhood and really collaborate on it. But the challenge is they're not doing anything above and beyond what other real estate agents are doing. So I used to list inventory for a builder. And when I would do it, I would take weeks to plan this broker's open. And I would create what we called a broker's open extravaganza. I would have not one, not two sponsors, but as you can see here, I would have probably 10, 15 different sponsors, $15,000 in giveaways. And there was, we would really strategize. We'd offer food, drinks, maybe a DJ, we'd make it fun, all different kinds of things. I think in this particular one, we had about 8 different houses open in the neighborhood, and we sold almost all of them during this time, during this one broker's open. And these were houses that were previously on the market with another agent, didn't sell. They brought me in. I think they've been on the market for 2 years. They were desperate. They were like, please, please, please help us get these properties sold. And we got all of them sold within, I think, 6 months, including homes that hadn't even been built yet. But that's because I was willing to do things that were different and out of the box and different from what everyone else was doing. So again, it just goes about thinking of what everyone else is doing and then go the opposite direction. Ask yourself, what makes a difference? So if you think about it, has anybody ever heard of the Blue Ocean Strategy or read this book? Feel free to open up your mic. Nope, I definitely recommend it. But when you think about the Blue Ocean Strategy, it's the simultaneous pursuit of differentiation and low cost to open up a new market space and create a new demand. It's about creating and capturing uncontested market space, thereby making the competition irrelevant. Here's why I have that on here. When I did the Brokers Open, I didn't do what everybody else does. I did something over the top that really no longer put me in competition with anybody else. Hence, we were able to have results. We were able to get the home sold, and my seller was happy. So just think about, how can you swim in the deep blue ocean with the sharks and not on the reef with all the other little fish, right? How can you do things differently? Now, here are the top 5 things that make a successful real estate agent. Now, I did not make these up. I actually interviewed some of our top agents all over the country, and I asked them, what are the top 5 things that you feel like make a successful listing agent? And it really boiled down to these things. Number 1, hire a professional photographer. We shouldn't see cell phone pictures. If you're not a professional photographer, you probably, in my opinion, shouldn't be taking the photos, right? Number 2, communication. Communication is always key. I can't tell you how many times I've been on the phone with an agent, we're negotiating, or there's things that come up and they're almost like working against you instead of working with you. And I'm like, hey, listen, we all have the same goal. We all want to get to the closing table. We're not here to be against each other. And you're also not here to make decisions for your client. Number 3, pricing strategy. As I mentioned, are you listing within the ballpark of what the numbers show, not what you feel the home is worth, but what the actual numbers are validating? And then if you're not, do you have a pricing schedule strategy already set up? Number 4, home prep, the preparation that goes in before you ever list the house. It would take me a minimum of 2 weeks to list a house, unless there was an absolute emergency that they had to get on the market, because I would make sure that house was 100% ready before it ever hit the market. And then last but not least, your tool belt of vendors. Do you have those different vendors that really bring that team atmosphere that help make your listings a success? All right, preparing a listing, as I mentioned, it's your signature. The second your sign goes in the yard, it's your signature. It has your name on it. So buy the professional staging consult. Let them be the bad guy. I talked about good cop, bad cop, AKA the professional. Your stager needs to be familiar with your photographer. I think that's incredibly important. And I think it always boils down to what I call the 3 Ds, which are really the hard conversations you can have. Number 1, depersonalize. Number 2, declutter. And number 3, deodorize. So depersonalize, the ways that I've always kind of explained this, especially if they have a lot of family photos. I'm like, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we want a buyer to come in and really imagine themselves in this space. And it's hard for them to imagine themselves if there's other distractions. Maybe they're looking at your holiday photos or your family photos. And so that's reason number 1, is you want something where they come in and they can completely imagine themselves living there. And the other reason why it's important to depersonalize is reason number 2, especially maybe if they have little kids. These photos are going to be made public. They're going to the MLS. They're going to syndicate to hundreds of other websites, including realtor.com and Zillow and all these other websites. Do you really want family photos with your address all over the internet? And I would say 99.99% of the time, in my experience, they're like, okay, that makes sense. We'll take all the family photos down. Number 2, declutter. You really go to the rule of thumb. If you're not using it today, it needs to go in a box, either in the garage or in storage. And especially if you've got kids at home and you've got toys all over the place. And I've personally done this because I've moved 13 times in 15 years and I have 2 kids. If they're not using it, they understand. My kids, even right now with my personal house being on the market, when your home hits the market, it's no longer just your home. It's now available for other people. So although you're still living there, you need to understand that it has to be ready for showings at any given time. And so that means, hey kids, if you've got toys all over the place, I want you to pick your top 3 favorite toys that you can play with, and everything else is going to go in a box. And then of course, deodorize. Mr. and Miss Seller, I know you love your pets, but a lot of people are going to come in. Maybe some people are allergic to cats or some people are allergic to dogs. So we just want to make sure it's a safe space that they can come into. Maybe we need to hire a professional carpet cleaner. I mean, I've been in $1 million plus homes that I've walked in and walked right back out because it smelled like dog pee. Or some kind of pee. I don't know what it was, but I still remember that to today. And that was years and years and years ago. So that's because the agent should have had the hard conversation with the seller and let them know before we have this big broker's open, we really need to make sure the house smells fresh and clean and have those hard conversations up front. And then last but not least, protect your valuables. Make sure there's not anything valuable that's out that somebody, although, other agents are going to be showing the house, a lot of times people are browsing the house. Don't stick your valuables in a drawer or something that can be easily accessible, because people are going to be opening cabinets and drawers. Think of everything for sale, essentially. Same goes for medication. Same goes for firearms and guns. I can't tell you how many showings I've been in and there's like a loaded gun propped up against the wall. Okay, well, there's nothing to say a buyer could have a kid that's running through the house or what have you. We don't want to have that accessible. So again, having those conversations, the hard conversations up front, are going to save you in the long run. So are you preparing to list? I wanted to give you guys this quick example. So look at these photos. This is the exact same house. Go ahead and put in the chat, what are some of the differences that you guys see? So differences between the exact same house on the left, who also had professional photography, and the house on the right. Grass is greener, lighting. Okay, what else? Lighting. Front of the home versus the side. Angle of the shots. Anybody else? Okay, so the pictures on the left, obviously this is actually a very well-known agent locally, hired a professional photographer, went kind of a different approach, obviously doing more of the sunset type photography session. Now, kitchen looks bigger in white. Awesome. Curb appeal. Yard makes look larger, angle in the kitchen to show double oven. White paint makes the kitchen look more spacious. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys hit it on the head. So this house was on the market for 4 months. It never had a showing, never had any offers, and the sellers were getting pretty frustrated because they needed to relocate out of state. So they released their listing. They asked me to come in, and instead of just immediately listing it to secure the listing, I said, okay, as you can tell, this kitchen feels very dark, right? What do we think is the most valuable part of real estate in a house? It's usually the kitchen, right? So I recommended, and going back to the last slide when we talked about the tool belt of vendors, I had painters on hand. I said, what if I sent one of my painters to come give you a quote? I think, would you guys be open to painting the kitchen white? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I know this is not going to be fun. This is going to put us a couple weeks behind schedule. It's going to be a hassle, but I promise you it's going to be worth it. And so they were open to it. They came in, we painted everything white, which as you guys can see, made it very airy. They also fertilized the grass, which made it more green. And then we did daytime shots as opposed to these sunset type shots, which make it look very dark. So here's the difference. Previous listing, exact same house, was on the market for 4 months with no showings, no offers. I had the market because we properly set it up to get, before we ever listed it, it was on the market for 6 days. And for more money, it sold for more money than it was originally listed for. So the point in saying all of this, work together as a team with your affiliates, with your vendors. And what happened was, not only did I believe the kitchen needed to be painted white, but I brought in my stager and I said, I want to see your opinion. So she came in, she said the exact same thing, and she brought some samples of popular like Kelly Moore colors or Sherwin-Williams colors and said, here's what I think you should do. So it's important to work together as a team. Your listing needs to be eye candy. So look at the first exterior shot. Like you guys said, the angle's a little bit off. It's really showing the tree instead of the house. And it's very dark and gloomy versus the second photo. So when potential clients are going through the MLS and they're going through these long searches or they're browsing on the internet, the first photo needs to be eye candy. It needs to be a magazine quality photo. I've always considered this, that it should look like it belongs in a magazine. I don't care if it's a $500,000 house or a $50,000 house, because that's the first thing they're going to see. And that's how they're going to decide if they want to look at the home, right? If it's the same thing if you guys are on a dating app. And I haven't been on a dating app. I've been married for 15 years. But let's say if you were on a dating app, and would you go put your worst picture as the front picture if somebody's going to decide if they want to talk to you or not? No, you're going to put your best picture forward. And that's no different in real estate, not trying to compare real estate to a dating app, but you understand the idea. So your primary photo is where buyers will decide if they want a showing or not. Does your listing feel warm and inviting? So left or right, put in the chat, which one feels more warm and inviting, the left side or the right side? All right. I'm glad everybody's in agreement with me and says the right side. So that was my listing. All right. Market analysis. Give your sellers a ballpark price range, then set a schedule of price improvements. We've already talked about that. What's the average days on market? I saw that somebody put that in the chat earlier. So not only look at what's sold, what's active, but also giving the proper expectations of what homes are selling for, instead of saying, hey, your house is going to fly off the market. No, hey, here's the average days on market. Homes are selling between 30 to 45 days in your neighborhood. So setting those proper expectations up front. The market should not dictate your success. I think this is really prevalent, especially right now, as we're having a correction in our market. There's plenty of business for everyone. There's plenty of opportunity for all of us to take market share. Know how long it will take to sell the home, set those expectations. How do other active listings compare in comparison to yours? What's the average price point in your market? Does your listing fall below or above? This is really important. If you're going to be dealing with, higher end properties or luxury listings, the buyer pool gets smaller, right? So by nature, they might take a little bit longer to sell. Is it a large or a small buyer pool? Where do the buyers currently come from? All right, maximum exposure. We've got just a couple minutes here and we'll take a break. Maximum exposure, both online and offline. Farm a neighborhood and create a buyer waiting list from showings, open houses, etc. Anytime we had a very popular flip, then we would basically take a waiting list and do another similar flip in the neighborhood. And we would literally have a waiting list of 20 people that we could contact as we were listing the house. Create a full service marketing program to get your home more visibility, both online and offline. Combine the best of traditional and tech savvy tools. And some of these include listing in the MLS, of course, your yard sign, your lockbox, your accurate showing instructions, text codes. I love putting a text code sign writer on my signs, social media, Facebook exposure, reverse prospecting. Guys, when you reverse prospect through the MLS, don't do just the generic default message that goes out, because everybody sees that and everybody deletes it for the most part. Do something that's personalized, that's going to make them open the email. It stands out from what everybody else is doing. Create open house and broker opens. We talked about the broker open extravaganza. Of course, syndication. If you upload into the MLS, ask your brokerage what other websites does it syndicate to. And LinkedIn's another great tool, as well as mailers to the neighborhood. We talked about the communication was one of the keys to really being in the top 5 of what makes a good listing agent. And so communication comes with follow-up. I know myself, in being a seller, I don't like when I don't hear from my agent, and even if there's not necessarily any information to give, right? So I always made it a habit to follow up with my sellers weekly, even if it was simply saying, hey, as you know, we didn't have any showings, but here's all the things that we're doing this week in order to boost your listing. I sent it to 20 reverse prospecting. We boosted it on Facebook. We're scheduling an open house for next week. Just let them know that you're actively working on it. You didn't just put it into the MLS and you're done. So give a weekly update. I always like to do this on Mondays, because if we did do an open house over the weekend, then I have some stats and reports that I can give from Monday. You can also get with some vendors. They've got what we call list reports, and then consistent communication is key. So there's the old saying that, no news is good news. I think in the terms of being a good listing agent, no news is bad news. Even if it's just explaining to them what you're doing to get their listing in front of more eyeballs, I think you should be in weekly communication. If your seller's having to text or reach out to you to see if you have any feedback, then there might be some challenges there. So even if I let them know, we had a showing last week, I've reached out to the agent 3 times and they haven't provided any feedback, but I let them know that I'm doing my job and I'm trying to get some feedback. Feedback is automated through Showing Assist. So of course you can go into after they have their showing and you can ask for the feedback directly from there. I always found that was better than texting the agent directly because it goes into their email and they can kind of do it at their own leisure. Showings automatically text and email the sellers. I let them know that we use Showing Assist and that it's a very automated process. And of course, if there's a husband and wife, I always ask who's going to be the better contact, who has their phone with them throughout the day. So if the husband's maybe an attorney or a physician or a job, but they're really not in front of their phone, then maybe the wife or vice versa is the one that should be the contact to approve any showing. So I ask them up front, who's going to be the one that's going to be checking their phone, checking their email, and can be accessible to approve showings. Share with them the advertising that you're doing. Like I said, create that in your updates. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we did a Facebook post. We posted it on Craigslist. We boosted it through our lead generation platform. Whatever it is, just share with them all the different marketing things that you're doing. Don't be a secret agent. A secret agent is one that, of course, we want to let everybody know that we're an agent and, of course, have all of our branding on social media and then add them on the social media and tag. The reason why I say tag, and some of you are already thinking, oh, I don't want to add my clients to social media. That's a personal platform. I mean, create a second one if you need to. I wouldn't recommend creating a second one. But the reason why I say tag them is you're now opening up your audience to people that they know and trust. And the reason why that's important is because they probably know people that are looking for similar properties, maybe in their line of work or their sphere or what have you. So if you tag them and it's set to public and they have those, and I let them know that I'm going to be tagging them so they can have the settings accordingly on their social media profiles. And that way it now opens it up to their audience. And it goes back to that consistency that this is a team effort. I'm working with the photographer and the stager and my marketing team, but I'm also working with you, Mr. and Miss Seller. There's work and things that we're going to do together to get you the most exposure. Consistency matters. I think you've heard me say this several times throughout. Show your results, no obligation and cancellation guarantee shows that you mean business. As I mentioned, I never made somebody stay attached to a listing agreement if they didn't want to. Because if they went out of the listing agreement and you don't let them out, they're probably going to make you miserable. But I find that if you do it right, for the most part, that shouldn't happen very often. Share your personal average days on market versus the average agent. So because I do this, and this is why my homes sell on average 14% faster and 20% higher than the average price or whatever, know your personal stats. If you don't have any personal stats, then ask your broker what the brokerage stats are. Post on social media and on a regular basis, add listings to Facebook Marketplace and renew it weekly. Same for Craigslist. Post on Craigslist and renew it. So again, what are all the different ways that you can get maximum eyeballs and exposure? Share listings with potential prospects in Facebook groups. And then, as I mentioned, a reverse prospecting through the MLS. Don't just do that canned email that everybody recognizes and everybody deletes. Send a personalized message. So I would say, hey, Sally, it's Micah. I saw that you had some clients that matched the criteria at 123 Main Street. I just wanted to give you an update. We have an open house this weekend. If you'd like to send your clients, I'll make sure they're registered with your name. Or, I saw that you have clients at 123 Main Street. I just want to give you an update that we just did a price reduction to $200,000. So have something of value that they can now go in and share with their clients. Or maybe it's even you went in and did a video and you want to share the video link that they can share with their clients. Optimizing your listings. We've already touched on scheduling of price improvements. Even rotate through the primary photo. So we talked about the primary photo being magazine quality, being really that eye candy where potential buyers decide if they want to look at the property or not. So I would always ask my photographer, hey, I need 2 or 3 magazine quality photos. And that way I could rotate through them on a weekly basis. Renew on all social media platforms, optimize your website. You could do that using blogs and SEO and Google PPC and other things. Share listings through your lead capture tools. I see this mistake all the time, and it's a mistake in my opinion, but to each their own, is agents will go share their listings through a third-party website like Zillow, like Realtor.com. They have no way of lead capturing off of that. So when they share it through those third-party websites, they're in turn really giving those leads to other agents that are buying them, right? So I know for us, we use KV Core. We have the ability, and everybody has a different CRM here, but we have the ability to share our own personal listings through a domain, a subdomain, and then be able to lead capture off of that. So I think that's incredibly important. So the leads are going directly to you. You can have an email list of your active leads that match that certain criteria. And of course, YouTube. I mean, YouTube is owned by the #1 search engine, Google, and YouTube is the #1 video search engine. So even if you don't like video, I think it's really important to do a video tour on YouTube and a short form content on Facebook Reels, on TikTok, and really be in front of as many potential consumers as possible. I don't know if they do this anymore, but I used to do this a long time ago. If it was really a unique property, I would enter it into the Oklahoman for the listing of the week. So I would just find out who the contact is over there, and just send them kind of the details, and they kind of rotate through different properties. And then, of course, to be a little bit more strategic, you can offer bonuses or higher commissions. So agents will says will face, but I don't I don't think that's correct. So agents, obviously is some kind of incentive for them to take a look at it a little bit more. All right, landing pages and lead capture tools or text codes. As I mentioned, don't share your listing through third-party websites. You're giving your leads away. So one of the things that we talked about on Monday is creating a landing page. And if you guys remember, a landing page has one specific purpose. So if you create a landing page specific to this type of property or a squeeze page for only your listing and put the link in all of your advertising, that way when the consumer clicks on it, there's some kind of lead form that they fill out, and that's how you capture their information, and you can hence go and follow up with them. The same thing for text codes. I stopped using flyers and flyer boxes years ago for a couple different reasons. The seller's going to get mad if the flyer box gets empty, because people won't just take one flyer, they'll take 20. All of a sudden it's empty, and unless you're driving by the listing all the time, it's going to happen, right? Or if it rains and your flyers get all wet and soggy and distorted. So what I started doing was putting a custom text code on the top of my sign as a sign writer. And for example, it would say text home to a Google smart number. And so when they texted that certain code to the smart number, it would come as a notification to my phone. It would automatically send them the information on the house. So, hey, this is a 3-bed, 2-bath with the address for $250,000. Text me if you'd like to set up a private showing. But what happens is, because they did that and it was automatic while they're in front of the sign, then I could call them and they're literally still sitting in front of the house. So we all know that if you can call them within the first 5 minutes, then your chance of conversion just drastically increases. Now, reevaluate and go beyond the 3 Ps. So we say a lot of agents use the 3 Ps. They put a sign in the yard, they put the listing into the MLS, and then what do? They pray. They pray that it sells. You want to be a lot more strategic in that. So I would say do the 4th P, which is prospect, be proactive, and provide value. So just curious, what are some of the different ways that you guys provide and do the 4th P, which is prospect, be proactive, and provide value? How do you do those things for your sellers? Somebody asked, Liz, you asked, do you recommend Craigslist? Yes. To today, I still use Craigslist. I use Facebook Marketplace. I think the more the merrier, my personal opinion. How many of you do the 4th P with your sellers? Prospect, be proactive, or provide value? Go ahead and put something in the chat. Promote on social media, door knock, communicate. Jillian says, I struggle with the 4P. That's okay. That's why we're here. We're learning from each other. Door knocking, that's great. I think it's always important. You know, if you're doing an open house, we all know that neighbors are going to visit the open house anyway. So you might as well invite them and let it be from you. So I've always taught that if you do an open house, you should door knock 10 houses to the left, 10 houses to the right, 10 houses across the street. So do the 10 by 10 by 10. Go an hour early and invite them for a special preview just for the neighbors. And that's going to allow you to really build rapport, build a relationship with the neighbors, allow them the opportunity to pick their new neighbor. And also they're not interrupting during your actual open house time that's open to the public when you have potential consumers coming in. This says, plan events at the property if they're vacant. Awesome. I've actually done that on some of my vacant properties that we do flips. We would host like a flipping live class, for example, and invite agents to there. And then in turn, they can walk through the property and see the property. So a lot of great ideas.
I've done some like different groups that meet monthly in some of my larger higher end properties, like different charitable organization brunches and stuff like that. If you offer up a really cool property, then you have people coming in. And I've sold a couple of my listings from those type of events, just letting them use it as a meeting place.
I love that, Liz. That's such a great idea. So you have a monthly event and then you just rotate between your listings.
Yes, yes.
So what type of group or event are you hosting there?
Well, I've done in Oklahoma City, it's like millionaires under 40. There's a little small group. I've done those. I've done Homeless Alliance board meetings. I've done Susan G. Komen board meetings, just different things like that.
Oh, okay. Awesome. I love that. So any other ideas based on what Liz just said? I think that was some great feedback. Rakita says that's cool. Anybody else? Anybody do something similar?
I don't, but it'd be good to have like book club meetings there.
Yeah, awesome. So definitely, check with your broker and make sure that that's in line with your company policy. And then of course have the conversation with the seller and make sure that they approve. But I think that's a really good idea. Looks like Keely agrees that that's a good idea as well. So fantastic. Deal or no deal? We've all heard that before, right? Many agents will talk their clients out of the transaction. I have heard this over and over again, and it's absolutely amazing to me how many times they're actually talking their clients out of the transaction. So like I said, always work with the agent on the other side, as we should anyway. It's a very small industry and everybody knows everybody. You definitely don't want to get the reputation that you're difficult to deal with. And because you never know when your next deal is going to be. And then also just keep in mind that as agents, we're just the communicators. So we're not here to make decisions. A lot of times we don't like the decisions that our clients are making, but at the end of the day, it's their home. Either they're selling or they're purchasing, and we're all here to get to work together and hopefully get to the closing table. So just work, nicely with the agent on the other side and don't talk your client out of the transaction. If you have an inspection list that, looks kind of scary, don't make it worse. Just the best agents learn how to adapt and control this conversation, control the process, control the situation. So don't scare your buyer, use facts and be solution oriented. So, okay, here's the problem. How can we find a solution? Work well with other agents. We talked about and cooperating together. You never know when your next deal is going to be. Stay on top of all communication. Keep your paperwork aligned and organized. Now, I know a lot of agents that's not their forte. They're like, listen, I can go out and get clients, I can go sell, but I just hate paperwork. That's fine. If that's you, then you might look at leveraging and hiring a TC, hiring a transaction coordinator for somebody where you might pay them, for example, per transaction. And that's their job, is to make sure that your paperwork is in compliant with your brokerage. So there's nothing wrong with that, but you just need to learn what your specialties are and then adapt accordingly. Don't assume or make decisions for your client. That goes back to communication. Continue to stay top of trends and best practices. I think in real estate, and obviously you guys are doing this, you're all here learning, but we should always be learning. It doesn't matter how long you've been in the business. Engage, collaborate with other agents, and then of course, follow all contract timelines. I always have the conversation when a seller is signing the contract. Of course, you want to go through the contract with them, but also have a schedule of timelines. Here's when the inspection period is going to end. And here's when the appraisal is going to be scheduled. Here's when we can expect to get the appraisal back. Here's when closing is set. So make sure that they know and expect all the timelines up front. Become a professional negotiator. Eliminate your ego. There's one of my favorite phrases is your ego is not your amigo. A lot of times, those of us in real estate, sometimes we tend to have an ego, myself included, but it's important to eliminate that and really make sure that we have our client's best interest in mind. Look strictly at the numbers, not emotion. The reality is most human beings, just in human nature, we make decisions based off emotion, not just numbers. So it's important to be factual and solution oriented. For example, when you can see this graphic here on the right, it shows the original price, the median, and the sales price. So what the differential between what the home was originally listed for versus the sales price. And it's important to show that because I can say, well, on average, homes were selling, or originally listing for 200,000, but as you can see, they sold closer to 180. So when you have those conversations up front, they understand that just because they listed their house for 200,000 doesn't mean they're going to get 200,000. Maybe in today's market, they will. That's fine. Maybe in today's market prices, depending on the type of house, is going over asking, but just setting up those expectations. Every seller is motivated with the right terms. I absolutely, one of my biggest pet peeves is when somebody puts in the MLS, my seller is motivated. Okay. What does that mean? I mean, show me one seller that's not motivated if the right terms come across. So are you basically disclosing to me that they're willing to take less than what the price the home is listed for, which as your fiduciary responsibility, you shouldn't really be disclosing that. I never understood quite what that meant. So as Liz said, aren't they all? Absolutely. That's the way I've looked at it. So I'm like, when you look at your MLS and you look at the property description or you look at the realtor remarks, that is real estate. That is virtual real estate for your listing. Don't waste your virtual real estate saying the seller is motivated, something that I already know, right? So I just never quite understood that. CMA, pull the 3 closest comparables in size, age, and quality of home. Ask, how did your buyers come up with that numbers? So, if you're negotiating and let's say you get what you consider a lowball offer, the house is listed for 200 and they come in at, 170,000. Instead of naturally getting offended or defensive, just ask the buyer's representative, I'm curious, how did they come up with that number? And I will tell you 9 times out of 10, it's not because they're looking at any concrete data. They're just coming up with a number with the one they want to offer and say, okay, I'm happy to present that to my seller. But I just also want you guys to have in your hand the same data that my seller is looking at, which shows that the home is worth 200, not 170. Right. So again, I'm going back to the data, but of course, always present every offer as we should. Don't give away your client's terms without permission. That one's key. Of course, we should never do that and continue to work with new buyers until it's executed. Let all parties stay in the know. I remember this when I first got licensed, probably in the first couple of years. And it's one of those that I'll never forget is I went and showed a house, showed my buyers. We weren't there for 15 minutes. We decided we're going to write an offer, had all the paperwork ready, called the listing agent on the spot and said, we're going to be sending over an offer. And she's like, oh no, that property went pending earlier today. And I'm like, wow. Okay. So not only did you waste my time, you wasted my client's time. You should have canceled the listing and let us know that it was going under contract before we ever viewed the property. Or better yet, you should let us know that there were offers coming in. And if we wanted to move up our showing, because that would be what's in the best interest of your seller, that you should have given us the opportunity to move up the showing should we have been able to, right? What are some of your best practices that you guys do in those type of situations? Anybody?
I've never been in, on the
Oh.
buy side, but on the sell side, I've had that, and it was actually, we were selling it and the offer came in 30 minutes before the open house. So literally I was like at the open house standing on as people drove up trying to get it, and Zillow canceled and was apologizing, but giving my card out, telling them I could help them find another home. So that's what I've done on the
Awesome.
sell side.
I love that. Yep. So you canceled the open house, but you also still showed up, right? As that courtesy to let them know. Liz, you said repeat the question. So the question was, in a situation where homes go under contract and you still have, you should have showings scheduled, how do you handle that type of situation? Nobody? Okay, well, we'll kind of move on from that, but if you have anything, feel free to go ahead and put it in the chat. Keep in mind when we're representing the seller, of course, we want to get as many offers as possible, even if the initial offer definitely is very attractive, the more the merrier. So if you already have showings scheduled for the rest of the day, I would personally give a courtesy call to those showings and let them know that we might potentially go under contract. Of course, do as your seller would like you to do. So again, we don't want to make decisions for our clients. I would give the seller the option and then let them decide. Understand the differentiator between the list price and sales price. We talked about that. Consider all the terms, not just the sales price. I always have that conversation with the seller. It's not just about the sales price. What are they getting a loan? Are there any concessions? What's the viability that it's going to get to close? Things like that. So you want to consider all the terms. As we talked about last week, practice your scripts, because scripts are the anatomy of a conversation. So if you're maybe you're newer and you've never been on a listing appointment, don't let going on your listing appointment be the first time you've ever practiced. Practice with your spouse, practice with somebody that and just act like you're going through the process. We are the messenger/communicator. So the 7 D's of communication. Number 1, don't be unprofessional. Number 2, don't answer for your client. I know some of these sound elementary, but I promise you I have these on here because I've run into this over and over and over again. Number 3, don't take it personal. Number 4, but also be decisive and direct. Number 5, direct the conversation. Remember, we're a real estate coach. We're coaching these clients through the biggest transactions of their life. Number 6, drive to a solution. So 5 was direct the conversation. 6, drive to a solution. And number 7, don't talk too much. There's a reason why we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. The best professional agent is one that asks questions and does not jump to ask the next question, that they genuinely are getting to know their clients, what their clients' goals are, and listen, which is hard for many of us, including myself, to do, but it's something that's incredibly important. Leverage and delegation. What is your hourly worth? How many listings can you handle? What items can you delegate? So when you know your hourly worth, that now allows you to delegate certain items like showing assistants, transaction coordinators, virtual assistants, licensed assistants. You can delegate even if you don't want to hire an assistant. You can delegate using systems like Fiverr or shared virtual assistants, something that's more task oriented. As I mentioned, if paperwork is not your specialty, then you might consider hiring a TC and have somebody that really enjoys kind of the compliance side of things and keeping your paperwork in alignment. So you have to ask yourself, when you're ready to delegate or leverage, how much are you giving up in time and money by not leveraging? We all have the same 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Some of us just leverage better than others. Time is an excuse. When you hear somebody say they don't have enough time, it's not a time issue because we all have the same time. It's a delegation, a leverage, and a time blocking issue, right? So that's really just an excuse. Master your skill set. As I've learned in coaching and training with Tony Robbins, there are 5 phases of mastery. Number 1 is creation, 2, implementation, 3, momentum, 4, stabilization, and then 5, you have mastery. Mastery is a possession of great knowledge, skills, and habits that make the master of you. So even for those of you that haven't been on 100 listing appointments, that's okay, but you have to get started to get started. And so, number 1, don't let the first time you be on a listing presentation be the first time you've ever practiced. And number two, don't be scared to bring on a partner or somebody to co-list, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this, to learn from, but set the expectation of, hey, I don't want you to do everything. I want to learn from you and what your process is. So I can in turn, maybe after 3 listings, do it myself. So having those honest conversations. Now, here's my contact information. You've got my cell phone. You can follow me on social media if you have any questions. I'm happy to help. Also, I'm offering to the attendees a free 15-minute strategy call. You see my calendar link here at the bottom, ruwatcalendar.com. If you have any questions, you can jump on my calendar.